Subtracting fractions. We need to be aware when there's subtraction between the fraction because we have to subtract everything in the numerator. But again, subtracting fractions is just like adding fractions. We want a common denominator. So we're going to factor the denominators, and since x doesn't factor, I'm going to stick parentheses there even though there's not a plus sign. That's to remind me that that x is not common to this x, which is being 4 is being subtracted from. So anytime that you have terms, you want to use parentheses to change it into a factor. For our least common denominator, you're going to look to see what's common, and these x's are not common. So there's nothing common, and you're going to do the leftovers. You're going to use everything that was in any of the denominators to find a common denominator. Notice that there are 2 factors in this denominator. But in the first denominator, there was only 1 factor, so it's missing the x minus 4. So we'll multiply both the numerator and the denominator by x minus 4. The second denominator was only missing the x. So I'm going to do that both in the numerator and in the denominator. But I'm going to be aware of that subtraction because I have to subtract everything here in the numerator. So let's use the distributive property to see what we have. 5x minus 20. And then we have subtraction of everything that follows. So I'm going to use parentheses temporarily. There we have an x squared and also an x. So if we were to write that without parentheses, we would have 5x minus 20 minus x squared and minus x. And that's where most people are going to make their mistake. And we'll continue to have that same common denominator. So now let's try and combine like terms and see what we have here. Minus x squared plus 4x minus 20 all over x times x minus 4. Now in the numerator, again, when you want to add fractions and it looks like everything has been combined, your last step is to see if you can reduce. And the way that we reduce is to factor. Fractions, factor, factor, fractions. So I'm going to factor out this negative sign. I'm going to come over here and write that for you. And now my fraction just has a negative sign sitting out in front of it. And that changes the numerator to all a different sign. So that x squared now is positive, that 4x is now negative, and that 20 is now positive. The denominator is still x times x minus 4. So will this trinomial factor? Well, our factors of 20 are 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 3 doesn't go, 4 and 5, 5's in my list, so that's all of the possibilities. Will any pair of these numbers multiplied to 1s ever give you a 4x? I think not. So we can just say that this is our final answer. So if you notice in the back of the book, or anywhere that you're looking at answers, if your answer differs from theirs, see if it's because they pulled out a negative sign. We tend to like those sitting out in front of the fraction as opposed to spread out throughout the entire numerator.